Hey, everybody, welcome to the Crimson Chronicles podcast. Rick Morton again here with my co host, Tommy Ford. And we have a really special treat today. We have the opportunity to sit down with Barrett Jones. Tommy, why don't you lead us in, give us a little bit of background on Barrett, embarrass him while he's sitting here in front of him and all that sort of stuff. And then we'll jump in and start grilling him.
Thank you, Rick and Barrett. It's great to have you here. I think I'm safe to say that Barrett Jones is the most decorated player in Alabama football history and one of probably college football history's most decorated. And this includes his on the field accomplishments through the years 2008 to 2012 seasons and also all his academic awards. And we'll get into that in a little while. But Barrett, we'll start right off the bat. You've been a great friend ever since you played. Your dad and mom have been my friends for 40 years since your dad played basketball at Alabama. And I just want to start out growing up in Germantown, Tennessee with two brothers similar in age. How did that go? Any fights, any arguments, y'all just love each other all the time or what?
I would say really it was like my mom had four because my dad maturity level is not that high. And it was really just four of us always running around and hanging out and playing sports. And we had a lot of fun. It was a great childhood. It was very competitive, but it was a lot of fun. I always say that the best way to encapsulate it was that we had a standing 2-on-2 basketball game at all times. We had a great basketball court in our house. It started out with my dad as the overwhelming one seed, and whoever was on my dad's team was going to dominate. And then there was a time where it was pretty even. We had some good matchups. And then quickly it became my dad was the overwhelming 4 seed where whoever was on his team would always lose. It was very competitive. Yeah, he couldn't play defense anymore. And in fact, the last time we played, he tore his meniscus. So that was it. That was the end of our 2-on-2 games. We told him that he was being soft and he needed to shake it off because that's what he always told us. So
Yeah.
it was a good culture growing up. I had a great childhood, loved competing and loved playing different sports. And it just had we had a cool house we grew up at where we had a little space to run around and play different things. So yeah, it was a really fun way to grow up.
Oh, Barrett, I was just saying Coach Goosetree back in the 70s and 80s would just tell guys to put some ice on it. So a torn meniscus,
No
torn
doubt.
ACL, whatever. Well, let me ask you this. Did your dad ever have any stories about playing for Webb Sanderson back in the early 80s?
He didn't talk a ton about it, honestly. I know it was very intense and he honestly didn't tell me a ton of very detailed stories about it other than I think they went to the Sweet 16 his freshman year and played against North Carolina, Michael Jordan. That was one that he told sometimes, but yeah, I think it was hard. It was a grind like all college sports. He didn't recount. I think, well, believe it or not, is a lot nicer now maybe than he was then, which he's not that nice now. So
Right.
you can imagine I say that tongue in cheek because I know him and he probably would admit that. I think he was pretty tough and I think CM Newton actually recruited my dad to go to Alabama, and then as soon as he got there, he left and Webb came. But yeah, they had some really good teams during that time. My dad, I tell me, he's way too soft to ever have played football. I'm glad he stuck to basketball where things are a little more gentle. By the way, I should give the listeners some context that I love my dad and we're very close. When I'm joking around with my dad, it's out of love, not out of, we have a great relationship and get along very well. And I'm sure he'll listen to this. So I want to make sure I toss a couple grenades over for him to hear when he listens.
Barrett, I think I've read in the past that when you were being recruited, you were the top rated center according to Rivals when you were coming out of high school. But even being an Alabama legacy, maybe Alabama wasn't really first on the list before Nick Saban got to Tuscaloosa. Is that a fair statement?
Definitely, which that's funny that I don't know how it is now, but back in the day, the very last second, they moved me to the number 1 rated center from like the number 7 rated tackle because it was worth more points in the recruiting rankings, and Alabama somehow wanted to rig that where they could get more points. I don't really know. That's just always what someone said because I was a tackle and the very last second I was the number 1 rated center. So I don't know how that works. But anyway, yeah, I visited Alabama, didn't have a tremendous experience there. On my visits, it just felt like we weren't going to be that good. We had some good seasons, but then had some struggles. And I was not that interested in it, to be honest. I'd already started looking other places. And then Nick Saban came, obviously, and everything changed. So I definitely was not going to go to Alabama beforehand. I was looking very seriously at North Carolina and also Florida. That's probably the schools I was the most interested in. Urban Meyer was recruiting me pretty hard to Florida, and they were, thriving. They just won a national championship in '06, and then my freshman year, they won another one. And did I make the right decision? That's tough. And Tim Tebow hosted me on a visit. So it was fun being out there. I love North Carolina too. But Alabama on the outside looking in. And then obviously when Nick Saban came, everything changed. Funny story about that. My neighbor, Jimmy Sexton, I grew up next to him. He's Nick Saban's agent. And I was talking to him about where to go. And he was like, I think Alabama was actually about to hire a new coach, Nick Saban. Are you sure, Jimmy? He's on TV right now saying that he's not going to go to Alabama. He's like, yeah, I would just hold tight for a second. I think they might have a new coach soon. And I was like, okay. So sure enough, Jimmy gave me the inside scoop there that Nick might be coming to Alabama before maybe even Nick knew he was going to Alabama. Once Nick Saban came, it was a total 180 and everything was very organized and the program clearly was headed in a good direction. I do think people forget though, when I committed and went there, it was a lot different than the players that commit and go now, right? Where there's a lot of proven track record and obviously I think everything's changed now. It's a totally new coach, but for a long time, people know it worked and the foundation had been laid. When my class, which was the first full recruiting class Nick Saban had, committed and went to Alabama, they were coming off of a pretty lackluster 7-6 season. We weren't really sure what was going to happen and what it was going to look like. But I think all of us had the belief that we could get it turned around. Things headed in the right direction.
What is there anything you could point to that you would say this was something that kind of gave me the belief? This was something that gave me the confidence that it was going to be better than a 7-6 season and what we'd seen previously?
The kind of people he wanted. A lot of other places promised you playing time or, hey, we need you here and this and that. And his pitch was more like, hey, we want to create a competitive environment where we had the best players in college football and we go out there and trust the process and win a national championship. And for whatever reason, the way he presented it was very appealing to me. And it was just very evident that he had such a process-driven approach that I just really thought it was going to work. I honestly, I think for all of us, if we said we thought we were going to win 3 national championships in 4-year time, I'm not sure we thought that it was going to work that well, but I don't think we ever could have predicted that. I remember thinking when I went there that, hey, my goal is by my junior year, we're going to win the national championship. And obviously we beat that timeline. So yeah, it was funny the way it worked out. It was amazing to see the results and how quickly they popped up, but he was an unbelievable recruiter. And I think really just did a great job casting a vision and making you really want to be a part of something special.
Barrett, tell me about that first summer workout with Coach Scott Cochran in Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Yeah, so we loaded up the bus and the test was 16 110-yard sprints. And I was ready. I'd trained hard. The way it worked really quickly was that it was a 1-minute rolling clock and every position had a different time they had to make. And for us, I think it was like 17 and a half seconds per offensive line. And we had that time to run 110 yards. And then we had the other 42 and a half seconds to rest and turn around and then run again. So I was ready. I trained hard and I felt ready and prepared to run those sprints. And we get there and Scott Cochran says, all right, everybody in the buses. We load up the buses. We go to the stadium and it was 110 degrees. It was June. And in the stadium, it was really cool. I'd never seen it empty before, but the sun was coming off the bleachers. And they said, all right, there's one rule when we get in here. And that's that whatever happens, you cannot bend over. We never want to show the opponents that we're tired and that we're weak, and we're not going to bend over at Alabama ever. If you're tired, you put your hands on your head, you don't bend over. And so we said, okay, sounds good. So we started running and it was hot, but everybody was ready for the test and we ran. And after about number 8, someone bent over and Coach Cochran, in so many words, he said, that one doesn't count. And so we said, okay, that's annoying. Everybody was like, come on, man. But we're like, we can run one extra. No big deal. 2 later, that one doesn't count. Another one, that one doesn't count. That one doesn't count. So at this point, first day, people are yelling at the coaches. They're angry. They're like, man, I'm making my times. Why does it matter if I bend over? And when you get that tired, you get really illogical. I know for you two guys, y'all haven't worked out that hard in about 3 or 4 decades. So y'all wouldn't know that feeling, but it's very illogical when you work out that hard and you get in the red zone. So guys are yelling and we ended up running 28 110s that day instead of 16. And wow. I had never thrown up for physical exercise before that day, but my streak ended and I was throwing up stuff from several years ago and it was deep within the gullet. And it was a good introduction to this was going to be like. There's a standard. Doesn't matter about the results. Doesn't matter if you're making times. There's a certain way we do things and that's how we're going to do it. And if you have a problem with it, you're not going to make it very long.
For our viewers and listeners, I'm going to go over your 5-year career, Barrett, and that sets us up for many of the questions that we've got for you. 2008, you medically redshirted. I think you had a shoulder injury, maybe played 3 games. 2009, started every game at right guard, made freshman
You
All-American.
know how that works, Tommy. We found a shoulder injury at the end of the year to get me an extra year. Come on, let's be honest. So, medical red shirt.
How does that work? Okay, never mind.
They don't have to do that anymore. But back in the day, it was like a medical red shirt.
Yeah, put that sling on, Barrett.
Man.
2009, started every game at right guard, freshman All-American honors. 2010, started all but 2 games at right guard, missed the last 2 games due to high ankle sprain. 3rd team All-American, 1st team All-SEC. 2011, started all games except 2 at left tackle, missed 2 games due to another ankle sprain. 1st team All-SEC, unanimous 1st team All-American, Jacobs Blocking Trophy winner, Outland Trophy winner, and Werfel Trophy winner. 2012, started every game at center, your 3rd position. You were consensus 1st team All-American, 1st team All-SEC, and won the Remington Trophy. And you were the 2nd person in history to win both an Outland and a Remington. There are now 3. A Michigan player won both in 2022. And you are the only player to win an Outland and a Remington in 2 different positions and in 2 different years. You won national championships in 2009, 11, and 12, SEC championships in 9 and 12, and all of your academic honors. We don't have time to go over it, but 4.0 cumulative GPA for your bachelor's and master's in accounting. COSIDA Capital One Academic All-American of the Year, 4-year Academic All-American, and the National Football Foundation's William V. Campbell Award is the nation's best football student athlete, commonly referred to as the academic Heisman. So congratulations, Barrett, on a wonderful career at Alabama.
Thanks, Tommy. Some of the boring award names. I think that the only one that you guys are Alabama football historians, so probably the one I'm maybe the most proud of is not even one you mentioned. I feel like I was the only, and I'm really asking this. I think I might have been the only person that started on the 9, 11, and 12 teams. So you guys can figure out if there were any other people that started on all 3 of those teams, but I don't think there were. I don't remember any that if there were. So that was just a kind of a coincidence that it happened that way. That I got to start on 3 different national championship teams, but it was pretty cool to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But all this media awards, the way it works is the media has absolutely no idea who the good offensive linemen are. So they just ask someone like, "Hey, who's a good offensive lineman?" Someone's like, "Hey, this Barrett Jones guy, he's good. He talks to the media a lot. Let's vote for him." And works around, and Josh Maxson and Jeff Carrington are pushing this narrative that I'm really good. And so that they were the SIDs at the time. And it's just this ball gets rolling down the hill, and all of a sudden everyone's like, "Hey, maybe this guy's good." All the media stuff, it's fine. But the team captains, the championships, that's the stuff that really meant a lot to me.
Barrett, we're going to flash forward a little bit in your career to the 2012 SEC championship game. You had the Liz Frank injury. Obviously, not much was known about that at the time, but that's a really significant injury. I'm curious about what did it take for you to get ready to play in the national championship game with that injury over that month span that you had to get ready?
Yeah. So I hurt my foot in the SEC championship, immediately put it in a cast after the game was over because it was so swollen. It's the size of a softball, and pretty bad injury. Had a lot of blood down there, and it wasn't bleeding. It was just swollen, bruised. And so we wanted to let the swelling go down. Kept that on for 3 weeks. I had a little knee scooter, and then I had some crutches, and I just stayed off it, trying to let the swelling go down because it's really a season ender. Your foot's unstable when you don't have all this. You have to get that fixed, especially when you play an offensive line. And so then I started running on this thing called the Ultra G treadmill. Pretty cool, where kind of a weightless treadmill. You strap yourself into it. There's this air pumps up, and you can feel a certain amount of your body weight. Pretty neat. And so I started getting a little bit back in shape, and they actually took one of those down to Miami for me that I could run on that, get ready. And then I didn't practice at all. I went through some individual drills, some walkthroughs. There's 5 weeks between the game. So I never practiced. I was probably in terrible shape. Put the cleats on, had a little medical encouragement, got out there and let her ride in the national championship game. So yeah, it was good. It was good. I'm glad that I got to finish that way on the field. and it was very painful, but it wasn't that heroic.
Well, speaking of that Notre Dame game, we must ask, Barrett, you're leading 42-14 late in the game, and you and A.J. McCarron have a little public disagreement. Tell us about this and who was right.
Well, I love talking about this so much. I'm kidding. First of all, it's something that would never have been a big deal if Brent Musburger didn't talk about it so much because there was nothing else going on in the game. All people remember from that is AJ's girlfriend and pushing AJ. So that's the only thing people remember about that game specifically.
Yeah.
We broke the huddle a little bit late and we got out there and we were killing clock and they were in one defense. They shifted to another. I repointed the mic. And then by that time we got a leg. I don't know who was right. I shouldn't have said that back in the day. I was 22 years old or whatever. It was not a big deal and we're long over it, but it certainly made for good TV. The algorithms involved with social media are very interesting. And lately, I've probably had 20 people text me and say that they had this video pop up on Instagram or whatever. Like they saw me pushing AJ. So I don't know, somehow the algorithm decided to resurface that on anyone who likes football, getting ready for football season.
Wow.
That people have been seeing that video and they've been like, oh, I saw this video the other day. Let me guess. I was pushing AJ McCarron. How'd you know? I'm like, I don't know, because this algorithm is bringing this all up on all of your feeds, and I don't know why it's happening. But I guess people are liking it, watching it. So it's, we'll get more of this. Anyway, I'm not sure what all that means, but I just know that it's somehow every couple of years it resurfaces and people just love that video and they'll send it to me and be like, have you seen this video of it?
Well,
I'm ready to move. I'm ready. That's the first question everyone asks me every time I ever speak is about that video. So just funny how you work your whole career to be a nice guy and you shove somebody one time and that's all people remember.
We just didn't feel like it was a proper interview with you if we didn't ask it. We knew what you were going to say, but it was like, dude, we got to ask because everybody does.
That's always good logic. I try to preach to my son against that logic. Just because everyone else is doing it, don't do it. I'm just kidding.
Well,
I really don't mind talking about it. It's
no, Barrett, but coming off of that question, first of all, I want to say to you, ramble away, man. Like we want you to ramble because you might let loose with something that'll cause us to get caught up in the algorithm, and we would love
there you go.
that. So please, if there's anything else you want to say about AJ right now, we'll catch it here and hope the algorithm will take it and do something fun with it.
AJ's the man. I'm happy he's had a great long career and he's a great guy. I love him.
But I do want to ask an algorithm related question, and it goes to, there's been a video that's been floating around the last several weeks. I think last time I checked on Twitter, it had gotten about 10 million hits of Manti Te'o talking it was on a Notre Dame podcast, and he was interviewed about standing in the tunnel for the 2013 national championship game. And Notre Dame was the home team, and they busted out of the locker room first and got held up in the tunnel. And he said that they got held while you guys came out of the locker room and were permitted to take the field first. And he said he was there and he was hyped and he was into it. And he said all of a sudden he realized that there were a couple of guys that came by in front of him. I think, I'm trying to remember, I just lost it. I think it was Juan Caldwell and maybe DJ Fluker, I think were the two guys. Would that have been right?
Just Chance Warmack.
Chance Warmack, thank you. And they both had, he said his recollection was they both had their fours over their head. They had their shirts like tucked up under their pads at their midriff. This is his, I'm not saying this. He said big bellies hanging out. You can make of that what you want to. But he said he turned around and he looked at his teammates behind him as they saw that walk by, and that as those guys trotted onto the field, he said their eyes were about that big around and nobody was talking. And he said that set the tone for the entire game. What do you remember about that incident? Do you have any impression of them when you got out on the field or anything like that?
Honestly, my biggest recollection of that game is about 2 weeks before the game, maybe 3 weeks before the game, our offensive line coach, Jeff Stoutland, called me into his office and he was like, hey, have you watched any tape on these guys? And I said, yeah, watched every game like 4 times. And he was like, be honest with me, what do you think about them? I was like, I think they're terrible. I think we're going to absolutely kill them. And I was like, they're not that good at all. Like, why are they in the national championship game? And yeah, I know, they're not good. But just, hey, don't tell anyone. Okay, don't tell the young guys. I want to make sure that the guys are preparing hard. Okay, so just don't mention that they're not good. So I knew they weren't that good. So I think, well, I was in so much pain that I was just like, hey, you know what? I don't remember a whole lot about walking out on the field. I just remember knowing that we were about to go out there and blister these guys because I thought they would have been about 7-5 in the SEC that year probably, and it just worked out that they won a bunch of close games and the media loves Notre Dame. But yeah, it was a fun way to end it and fun to get revenge on him. But honestly, I was like trying to hype myself up for the game, getting ready to, because I just knew like these guys are not that good and we're about to kill them.
Hmm.
And it was also our think about it, it's the third national championship in 4 years. So like by this time, I'm like, this is old hat. We play the national championship every year. This is nothing new. Like the first one, I
Yeah.
was so nervous. I was like shaking. I remember how nervous I was to play Texas. And then LSU, I was like, we've already played these guys. I'm not really that nervous because I know what to expect. And then by Notre Dame, I was just like, okay, these guys are not good. We're going to kill them. Yeah, it's amazing what you can get used to. I think we all knew how we were going to go through and thump them. And that was a good team. We had a really good offensive line. So I think we were very confident that no matter what you threw up against us, we had a good chance to handle it pretty well.
Barry, your position coaches were Joe Pendry and Jeff Stoutland. What were they like to play under? And what was the biggest lesson each one taught you?
I love playing for both of them. Joe Pendry was your classic, like, crotchety old offensive line coach. I say that in a loving way. He just meticulous and loved being cranky, but I love playing for him. He made me a lot better and pushed us all hard to get better. They both came to my wedding, which was really nice of them. They both had a big impact on me and are just awesome guys. Joe Pendry helped me understand. He had this big thing he used to say that really stuck with me. First, you learn what to do. That's the first step. Then you learn how to do it. And then you learn why you're doing it. And if you can learn, once you understand the why and how it fits into everything going on around, then you can really be a great player. And I think that he was the one that taught me how to study film, taught me how to learn about watching. You don't watch much film in high school. My guys watch more now, but back in the day, like high school games were hardly even filmed. So that
Right.
wasn't much of a thing. And now all of a sudden you come in and you have all this film. And so how do you break it down? What do you do? What are you looking for when you watch film? Technique. He taught me everything about that. And then Jeff Stoutland taught me definitely more about that stuff too. And took me even to another level, but then he also taught me a lot about just passion and how to be a leader and how to communicate with your teammates and lead in a way that makes a unit good. I think he focused a lot on, okay, 5 guys playing together to make an awesome unit. I loved that about him. So I was very blessed to have 2 awesome coaches. In fact, both of those guys were way better than any coach I ever had in the NFL. Then those guys was the offensive line coach that I had when I was at the Eagles. And that was just Jeff Stoutland a few years older. So I got to reunite with him. So the older version of Jeff Stoutland, but those 2 guys were by far, I think people get to the NFL and they think, oh, this is going to be great. Like these NFL guys are so much smarter than the college guys. And maybe that's the case for some people, but not for me. I thought my college coaches were way more knowledgeable and just way better coaches, honestly, than any of the guys I really had in the NFL.
All right, Barrett, be honest. Who did you hate to go up against in practice every day?
Great question. People always ask me the best player I ever played against was, and I really don't even have a good answer for that in college. I have a good answer for it in the NFL. But in college, the best players were definitely the guys in practice that I faced against. I think the coaches had it out for me because my first year I was playing right guard and I had to block Terrence Cody every day and run drills, and it was awful. It was just painful to block a man that weighed 360 pounds. And it just is not a lot of fun to block someone of that size. So then the next year, I feel like almost exclusively Marcel Darius every single day. And he was just unbelievable. I hated blocking him. And he could beat me anytime he wanted. He was strong and fast. And at one point he was the highest paid defensive lineman of all time. There's a reason, because he was really good. And then I moved to left tackle and I was like, okay, thank goodness, leaving those guys behind. And then I had to block Courtney Upshaw every day, who was a really good player. Really did not like blocking him. He had the heaviest head of all time. He banged me with it all the time. And then my last year I played center. I was like glad to get away from that edge. And I had to block Jesse Williams, who was a really good player too. So it was never easy. I was just constantly out there grinding against good players all the time. If I had to pick one, peak Marcel Darius, if he were motivated in practice, was, I think, unblockable, at least for a slow guy like me. He was an unbelievable player.
Barrett, being the only offensive lineman in history to win a national championship at 3 different positions, what was your favorite national championship game and What was the hardest?
I would say my favorite one probably was the first one, just because it was such a new experience. And it was the hardest also, definitely. The LSU had a really good defense in 2011, but that game was just never close. And Texas, I think there was so much mystery around who are these guys? They're Texas, this big brand, Colt McCoy. That was definitely the most stressful one. It's in the Rose Bowl too. When I was a kid, I watched the greatest football game I'd ever seen as a kid was 2005 Texas USC. Matt Leinart, Vince Young, just 20, 30 NFL guys. And I remember watching that game as a freshman and watching Vince Young score the touchdown at the end of the game and just thinking, man, that'd be awesome. Someday I want to do that, hold that trophy. And then 5 years later, here we were going up against Texas at the Rose Bowl. So it was pretty cool to get to experience that. I think that was the one that I'll never forget.
Okay, so you talked about what Jeff Stoutland told you about playing as a unit and the 4 guys that you were playing with on the offensive line. Of all the guys that you played with during your career at Alabama, pick the starting 5 with yourself that you'd want to play with in a game.
One. Who's your playing?
This is your question, so you pick where you want to be. I just want to go on record that I stumped Barrett Jones.
I'm gonna go just random off the cuff.
Okay.
I'll go William Villegas at center. I'll go Mike Johnson at left guard. I'll go Chance at right guard. And struggling with the tackles. I don't know. There's so many good ones to pick from. Oh, man.
Andre Smith would have been a senior when you were a freshman.
Yeah, I didn't really play with him. I'd say put me at one of the tackles and either DJ or Cyrus Kwanjo, one of the others. Because Cyrus, before he hurt a bunch, was really good. So, I don't know. DJ was probably a little better of a run blocker, and Cyrus was probably a little better of a pass blocker. So, that's hard. Depends on what we were trying to accomplish there. And then just slot me in wherever I could fit. Even though I never really played right tackle, if I had to play right tackle, I could figure it out.
Who were your favorite guys to block for? The running backs.
Yeah, that one's not close for me. I get asked that a lot. Peak Mark Ingram in 2009-10, it was nothing like Peak Mark Ingram. He was a stud. The other guys were awesome. Trent was a good player, and he was a really good athlete and just fast, powerful. But Mark was a true running back. And really, Eddie, though, people forget how good Eddie was. Eddie Lacy was a really good player, too. He had a great feel for running the ball towards the end of his career once he got really confident. So then TJ Yeldon was a good player, but I would say Pete Mark Ingram, he just understood what we were trying to accomplish so well. And he was so good. He just made you right. Offensive lineman loved blocking for that guy. He was so fun. He was far and away my favorite one to block for. Obviously, I say that. We don't pay attention who's in the game, really. You're so tired and you're just focused. We had so many good running backs. And I was like, oh, Mark's in the game. I better block harder. It's just like watching film and thinking back on it. I love blocking for Mark Ingram. He was my kind of teammate.
So I'm going to throw you a little bit of curveball here.
Great. Love curveballs.
Our mutual friend, Jeff Norris, had a pretty big influence in your life. Can you talk about the influence that he had on you spiritually while you were in college?
Jeff, I've never heard of that guy. So I don't even know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who you're talking about. Jeff Norris had a huge impact on me. And I would say the other part of that story, and probably why it was the most memorable, in 2009, when we won the national championship game, or January of 2010, it was really a big time for me spiritually too. I felt like I was 19, I had 3 goals. I wanted to be an All-American and win a national championship and be a starter. And I did all of them when I was 19. So I wasn't a first-team All-American that year, but really accomplished all my goals. And was kind of like, man, what's now? What do I do next? I really felt empty after that. And Jeff was one of the guys who really discipled me and helped me understand that nothing was really ever going to satisfy me but my relationship with the Lord. And it was a big time in spiritual development for me. I was involved in Campus Crusade, where Jeff was the leader at the time. And so he had a huge impact on me. Also, around them was when I first started getting asked to speak places. And Jeff helped me develop some of those skills of how to speak and talk about my faith publicly and in big settings. He taught me something that I'll always remember. Whenever you talk, make sure people leave thinking about, man, how great is the Lord and how great is Jesus, not how great is Barrett. And that had a big impact with me and really shaped the way I try to write my speeches now when I talk in public. Yeah, he was a great guy who had a huge impact on me. And I love Jeff and actually texted with him this week.
Awesome.
He loves the
Well,
Tide.
Yes, he does.
There was something after the Rose Bowl game, after we beat Texas, that was an epiphany in your life about your identity. Could you explain that a little bit and how that game where he had reached the top as your 3 goals had been achieved, but it wasn't quite what you wanted in the end?
Yeah, I think just expounding upon what I was talking about with those 3 goals, I realized that I've been placing my hope and trust in my identity and my satisfaction had really been found in football. Even though I was a believer and I had unbelievable parents who were Christians and modeled for me what it looks like to follow Christ, and I trusted the Lord at a young age. It wasn't the most important thing in my life, honestly. It was a part of my life, but not the most important thing. And honestly, my identity was being a football player. And when that happened, it just really helped me understand that, hey, this is never going to satisfy me. And one of my favorite Bible verses is John 6:35. It says, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never hunger. He who believes in me will never thirst. I love that verse. And I just felt really unsatisfied. I felt, man, I have this spiritual thirst that I still feel. And I'll give you all a little mini sermon that has had a big impact on me during that time that I give a lot of times. But 3 things about thirst that are really interesting. First of all, thirst is the second most used metaphor in the Bible. It's mentioned 722 times. And number 1 is money. And the thirst, number 1 is it's God given. Everyone's thirsty. Number 2, it's universal. All people have to drink water. And number 3 is it's ongoing. You can't just drink water one time and be fulfilled. And so I felt the Lord placed the thirst in my heart. Everyone has it, but it's an ongoing thirst. And not that it doesn't mean that you have to trust. You're not continually coming to the Lord, but it's not something you do one time and then it's over. That's the beginning of your journey with the Lord. And it's a daily decision to follow the Lord and to decide, okay, I'm going to make Christ the most important thing in my life. Romans 12:1, I'm going to offer my body as a living sacrifice every single day I wake up. And that's the way I'm supposed to live. And so it was a big transformation for me of really understanding what my faith practically looks like, and not just to be a football player who happened to be a Christian, but a Christian who happened to play football and really reorient things to live for God's glory instead of living for my own glory.
Going to take you from a really deep spiritual truth to a really shallow question.
Okay, great.
You talk about
I love changing the subject.
Well, you talk about
My wife's
spiritual.
always getting mad at me. We were having like this deep talk, and then I'm like, "What are you on for dinner?" And she's like, "Someone's got to do it. We can't just sit here and talk about this serious thing forever. At some point, we got to just transition."
Like you
So-
just laid down this really profound truth about spiritual thirst. And so I just want to talk about practical hunger.
Okay.
One Memphis guy to another, favorite barbecue place.
Ooh, that's a tough one, but I actually really like the Germantown Commissary. That's probably my favorite spot. I like it a lot. There's a
with
big
it.
variety. I think, I've been to a lot of barbecue spots and there are different things that are good at different places. I actually really like Rendezvous. If you've ever been there, it's a little inconsistent. Sometimes it'll be really good. Other times it'll be just okay. But I think the ribs there are actually pretty good. There's some other places that are good too. In Central, like the wings are really delicious and they've got some great stuff. You got to know what to get at each spot. That's what they hang their hat on. So I'll say the only thing that I'm a fan of barbecue, obviously, but I just don't think anyone around here really has a great brisket. I say from my travels,
Ooh.
everyone, Texas versus Memphis and Kansas City, like everyone has things they do well. And I don't think we really have brisket figured out the way Texas does. Texas has some great brisket. So actually, probably if you made me pick, like brisket the best. And so I do enjoy every time I go to Texas getting some really tasty brisket because I feel like we're more of a pork based town.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very analytical. I also think our sauce is a little too sweet sometimes. I like a little more of just not all that sugar in the sauce.
I'm a
Our sauce is
vinegar-based
good.
sauce guy. I like vinegar-based sauces.
I agree. It just when you're a kid, you're like, barbecue sauce is so sweet and this is great. Brown sugar, just give them all. And then you come up and become a man and you're, no, I don't know if I want all that sugar and everything. I want a little more tanginess or maybe even something a little spicy. Keep it interesting. Yeah, I think we got some good things we do here. I also have a pretty wide palate and I leave room for a lot of things that a lot of other people do. We also have we have great Gus's fried chicken.
There you go.
Like when you go to Original, now it's chained out and there's a lot of places and I've had it in some other cities. It's not quite as good, but That's really good. Spicy fried chicken. And we got a lot of things we do pretty well here in Memphis other than just pulled pork. But pulled pork is quintessential Memphis, pulled pork ribs. There's a lot of really good pork products being put out in this town.
All right, Barrett, back to football. Now that your hunger has been satisfied for both of you.
I'm actually just increased. I have Central Mark. You run across the street from my office right now.
Give us your thoughts on Coach Saban as a leader, as a coach, as a motivator, and tell us your favorite Nick Saban story.
Man, that's a heavy question there, Tommy. Maybe break that up and do a two-parter next time.
We can do that.
I love playing for Nick Saban. He gets a lot of credit for how good of a football coach he was, and he is a great football coach, but I think he doesn't probably get enough credit for how good of a character development trainer of men that he was. He really made me into a man. And my dad obviously had a big part of that too. But you go to college when you become a man and you're on your own for the first time. I think just understanding, I loved the process. It fits so well with what I liked and believed in. In fact, many times I got in trouble with my wife because I'm trying to preach to her the process. And I teach something bad will happen to her. And I'm like, all right, babe, you got to overcome adversity. We got to quit looking at all this stuff. And let's just focus on the controllables and go out there and execute. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, just say, I'm sorry. That's all you just say. I'm not playing for Alabama. Anyway, if you're a husband out there and you are a big follower of quote the process, then just maybe don't always give it to your wife. And hey, don't focus on the results, whatever. She doesn't always love the Saban talk, but I love all that stuff. And I think it helps you in all areas of life that most people live their life by comparison. And hey, we're going to set a standard. We're going to follow that standard. All that stuff he taught me, I actually believed all that stuff. And I've used it in every area of my life. I feel like my spirit, there's so many spiritual applications that you can draw from that too, that it's not about other people. It's about a standard and trust the process, that kind of thing. So I loved everything that Nick Saban taught. My favorite story, I've got a lot of good ones. I think Coach Saban had a lot more fun than people realized. Probably the one that sticks out to me is we used to have this leadership council that I was on, and we would help determine players' punishments. And not really. I think looking back, I made suggestions, and we were like, that sounds good, coach. And that made us feel part of the deal. And one time there was this guy who was a guy who had transferred in, and he was just constantly missing class. He was a really good player, really good player. His dad was like an Hall of Famer. And you can probably figure out who it is. But he was a receiver, and he was great in practice. But he never went to class, and he was a terrible influence on all the other guys. He constantly was in there. He was getting punished all the time, but he just didn't care. He thought he was smarter than everyone else. And finally, one day I was just like, Coach, what are we doing here? Like you always talk about, don't be a blinking light. You can see a blinking light from long distance. It attracts attention to itself. But if it's just a bunch of lights, you can't really pick one out. I was like, we had this guy. I said, he's a strobe light, just constantly drawing attention to himself. We're constantly talking about him. I was like, I know he's good, but it's time. Let's move on. Kick him off the team. And which probably sounded heartless. Maybe if you're listening, you're like, man, Barrett is a bad guy. But trust me, it was time. He had failed all contests and was breaking all the rules. And he chewed me out for 10 minutes in front of all the other guys about how he just wanted to give guys a chance. And I was just trying to kick this guy off the team. And he was concerned about what was going to happen to him afterwards, which is all true. And he just yelled at me. And I was just like, okay, coach, I'll go with you. And I wake up the next morning, turn on the TV. On the bottom line of Sports Center, it's like Alabama excuses this guy from the team. And I was like, wow, after all that, you just wanted to yell at me in front of everyone to look like a nice guy and blame it on me when you kicked him off the team. So he's told that story before, and that's what happened. So it was funny. We had a good relationship, and he understood my point. I don't know if he listened to me or he probably already decided that in his mind. The guy who kicked off the team and won the national championship. So it worked out pretty well.
So Barrett, thinking about back over kind of your whole career, one of the moments that kind of sticks out for me is, I think it was in the national championship game, 2-point play, maybe, where there was a tackle eligible and you were the decoy. Does that sound about right?
It was in the Iron Bowl.
There you go.
But yes, that does sound right. And I actually was not eligible, but that's part of the trick. But yes.
Was there ever a time when you actually were lined up in the first option?
No, I was actually ineligible to catch the ball. It's actually a pretty cool play. It's called Old Brown Shoe. plays like Michael Williams, the tight end. He actually lined up in between me and Chance. I was the left tackle. Chance was the left guard. And so Michael Williams lined up in between us. So I would come off the line, a receiver would come on, and then I would go in motion to the other side, get on the line, and then the receiver would step off. And so now Michael Williams becomes an eligible receiver once I go in motion. The defense is not thinking that someone between the guard and the tackle is going to be eligible. And then everything rolls right. No one realizes that's an eligible receiver, and he blocks for a second, slips out in the flat, and we made it. So 2-point conversion with good old brown shoe. They just faked like they were going to throw it to me. I was supposed to pretend the ball went over my head. So I did that.
Well, Barrett, I've got a lot of stories I would like you to talk about, but we don't have time today. Maybe for another time, and we're going to start winding down here. But one of my favorite stories is your classic discussion with Sally Field about the movie Forrest Gump. Can you set the stage for that and tell us about that?
This is actually a pretty good story, and I always have to be careful telling this story because it sounds like I'm bragging, and I don't like bragging. I was at Jacksonville, Wyoming, which that's a beautiful place. If you've never been, just go out there sometime. Yeah. It's awesome. And I was at a 4th of July party. Someone invited me, and Sally Field was there. I think it was a CAA party, which I was in. That was my agency, CAA. So she was a CAA client. Anyway, my whole family was there. I was out there, and we had this dinner party, and they just randomly assigned these different tables, and you sat down, and I was at the table with Sally Field, and I'm making conversation, and I'm just sitting around talking. And what do you say to Sally Field? If you're working for Scott, one of it. I really just want to tell her, if you understand how big of a movie that still is in Alabama. We love that movie in Alabama. Said, yeah, why good movie. My character really, though, was like, we lived in Tennessee. Forrest Gump went to Alabama, but we actually lived in Tennessee. Good to meet you, Sally. Enjoying dinner by you. And 5 minutes passed, and I was eating, and inside I was like, it was just eating me up. And I was just like, hey, Sally, no big deal. But remember earlier when that was crazy? You were saying that thing about how your character was from Tennessee. Forrest Gump, Greenbow, Alabama. Remember the whole scene, Greenbow, Alabama? And she was like, no, he was from Tennessee. I remember working on the Tennessee accent. I was like, yeah, for sure. I get how ridiculous this sounds because, like, you were in the movie and everything, but wasn't he from Greenbow, Alabama? Didn't he say that a bunch of times in the movie Greenbow, Alabama? Remember that? The bus, when he's in the war, all that stuff. And at this point, she was like, I was in the movie. I think where I was from. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure you do. I get the part you probably studied. Maybe the mom was from somewhere else and moved to Greenbow. But like, Forrest Gump, we don't have much. Like, he was from Greenbow, Alabama. I'm sorry. Don't. He says it 100 times. Greenbow, Alabama. And she starts getting angry. Goes, hey, he's from Tennessee. And I'm like, and then by the time, like, other people were jumping and they're like, Sally, come on. Greenbow, everyone knows Forrest comes from Greenbow, Alabama. Sally Field's like angry. I'm arguing with Sally Field about where Forrest Gump is from. But I was like, Sally, you have played in a lot of their parts. You did. Got whatever, Dukes of Hazzard, whatever she was in.
Smoking
like,
the Bandit.
And I'm like, you got a lot of stuff, but you're not going to take Forrest Gump from us. Okay. Like I know he played for the Bear, but like he also was from Greenbow, Alabama. So I'm like, maybe in the book he was from somewhere else. I didn't even know there was a book, but in the movie, he was from Greenbow. So I had defended the honor. Sally did not like me. She didn't talk to me the rest of the night. And I was nice about it, but I just couldn't let that go unsaid.
Couldn't let it go.
It's just, I wanted to be like, have you seen the movie, Sally? And I don't know if she'd watched it in 40 years or whatever since she made it. So the movie stars, they don't sit around and watch their own movies. But I defended her honor, just so you know, that I had to tell her Forrest Gump was from Greenbow, Alabama. So
Well,
anyway.
Alabama folks absolutely are just in your debt for defending her honor because that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's a great movie. You go back and watch it. I think Tom Hanks is the greatest actor of that generation. Like, he's so versatile. He's unbelievable. He can play a guy in the army. You believe him. He can play a guy with special needs who mows the grass. He can do anything. He's unbelievable. He can play literally a toy, and you think that's a great movie. Toy Story. He can do it all. He's a great actor. He can be deserted on an island by himself for an hour, and people will still come to the theater to see him in Castaway. The guy's got it all. Tom Hanks is a stud. There might never be anyone like him. He's played best is past, but like back in the day, he was awesome. So I love that movie for a lot of reasons.
And he played about 6 characters in Polar Express too, so he could do it all.
There you go.
So,
So he's done everything. He must need money because he keeps being and stuff. I'm like, Tom, you did good, man. Let's rest the case. Like, you got a good lineup out there. We'll make some cameos and some stuff every now and then. We don't need a lot of feature films of these B-level movies for me. You got such a good repertoire. Let's just make the residuals on these guys and you go hang out somewhere. You got such a good deal going. Let's not mess it up with some terrible movies towards the end of your career. Anyway.
You defended the honor of the state of Alabama, right? You stood up for all of us Gumps with Sally Field. You also came back to the state recently. You came back to the Capstone and you spent some time talking to the team and with Coach DeBoer and the new staff. What was that like?
I guess that was very overblown. I just went to practice one day. Somehow we were like, talk to the team. And now if they win, they're going to be like, yo, Barrett, talk to the team. I'm like, I just went to practice. Everyone thinks that it's rousing speech. Pictures can lie sometimes. Yeah, it was great though. I just wanted to meet him and I was in town for something else or a conference. And I was in Birmingham and I just swung by there for practice one morning and it was great. Enjoyed meeting them and met some of the O-linemen and talked to them. But the guys were flying around. Practice has changed a lot since I was there. It's really fast, up tempo. Makes sense with obviously the way offense is gone. But guys look focused and motivated. My only tidbit is that I think that 17-year-old receiver is going to be really good. He looked like some of the guys I've seen out there in the past. He's a good player. He's got that extra gear to him. He was the only guy that really stood out to me. Is this guy could be really good. And not that other guys aren't going to be good, just that I didn't really know about that kid. Someone said, I don't really follow recruiting. Like people are like, how's Alabama going to be? And I'm like, man, I have no idea. We have all these new players. How do you even keep track of all that? I pay attention once the season starts, but I don't really care about recruiting class rankings and all that stuff. And I have 3 kids under 5. I don't work for ESPN anymore. Why would I want to keep track of all that? And once the season starts, I'll have an informed opinion based on what I see in the game, but I don't have a whole lot of an informed opinion now. But yeah, it seemed good. And the new guys seemed great. Kalen DeBoer, I was impressed with him and guys seemed to like him. So it's a totally new world in college football. It's way more of a business and way more transactional. And I'm not even saying that's all bad, but it's just the reality of how things are. Things have changed a lot. And I think this guy seems really well suited for the new world of college football.
Barrett, I want to close with one more story about you. This is really more your dad than you, but you were involved in it. Rex told me this story about you running into Russell Henley, the PGA golfer, and just inviting Russell and his family to stay with your parents during the FedEx St. Jude's, which is recently completed a few weeks ago. Rex didn't know Russell that well, and Russell comes in and he's very low key and just Rex took him under his wing and kind of felt sorry for him. And so Rex,
this sounds like
your
a
mom,
story that Rex told.
they take him out to
Rex took the poor professional golfer under his wing who makes like $6 million a year.
That's my point. Rex thought he was like destitute. So he and Leslie take Russell Henley to one of the nicest restaurants in Memphis. And then he comes back and goes online and Googles him and saw where he had already made $10 million on the PGA Tour. And he said, never again. But I do know Russell Henley has stayed with Rex and Leslie several times since then.
And if you ever need a golfer to root for Russell Henley, he's a great human. Now he has 3 kids too. So we've grown up together, gotten married, had kids, and he's an awesome dude. Enjoy seeing him every year. He came over. We always have dinner Tuesday night at the tournament and hang out. And now our kids know each other. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, speaking of kids, tell us about your family, your kids, and what you're doing now in the Memphis area.
Yeah, I'm in wealth management here in Memphis, and I have 3 children, a 4-year-old boy, a 2-year-old girl, and a 6-month-old girl. So got a great wife named Katie, and just a regular Joe. And it's great. I love being just an average dude and love what I'm doing, love my job, where I live, my church, live in Germantown, just outside Memphis, and just, yeah, very busy life. Way busier. People all the time, which I have a lot of tangents, but people like, that are young kids or college or high school are, I'm so busy. Or, no, you're not. Okay. You're not busy. Just don't even, you're embarrassing yourself when you say that. If you're in college right now and you're like, I'm so busy. No, you're not. You're not busy. Look back. I was busier than you were in college because I played football and was going to college. But even I wasn't that busy. I had plenty of time on my hands back then, comparatively to having a full-time job and 3 children and all kind of responsibilities outside. So, that's just how it goes. The busyness ramp goes up and then you guys get your age and now you're like, hey, I'm not that busy anymore. I got more time. Yeah. after your kids get older. It's like a what is that called? The math, some kind of curve, S curve or no, something like that.
Then you get grandkids and you get the payoff for all the stuff that your kids wore you out doing. So
That's right.
it's a great place to get to at a point.
That's another thing. All the grandparents are like, oh, my dad, he has all these pets. And he's like, grandkids, being a parent was no fun, but being a grandparent's awesome. I'm like, Dad, that's just what grandparents say to make themselves feel better that they're not in the game anymore. And
No. Listen.
They just best having kids around.
Let me coach you
You
up,
know?
man. I need to coach you up on this. Grandparenting is all the benefits of parenting with none of the responsibility.
My point though is all these grandparents act like they like that, but in reality, they're best being in charge. They like that. Some of them, maybe you didn't.
No,
But-
we sit around behind your back playing Monday morning
Question
quarterback about
our
all the
parenting decisions.
100%. And do
Yes.
everything we can to undermine your parenting whenever we have
No
your
doubt.
kids.
My kids come home and they're like, yeah, like my parents, you're like, yeah, they call them grannies. They gave me like whole grapes and like giant nuts and let us watch movies and eat ice cream. And I'm like, what is happening?
Did your grandparents do that for you?
Yeah, they did.
And so the fact is, your parents had to live through the misery of reprogramming you after your grandparents ruined you. We're just doing the same thing.
That's
it's
true.
just, it's a
And
rite of
when
passage.
with your first kid, you're like a little stressed about it all. But then by the time you have 3 kids, you're like, hey, if you'll take them, we don't care. Just whatever.
It's a night out.
If y'all want to take them to go see Gladiator, maybe cover their eyes during a couple parts, but they should be fine otherwise.
Man, we could sit here and talk life and kids and family and Alabama football and all kinds of stuff for a long time because you're just an easy guy to talk to. But we're not going to do that. And
Well, I used to talk for a living. Now I still do talk for a living, but now I just talk about people's money instead of about football. So if you got any financial questions, we can do another session on some kind of on what's going on with interest rates.
as compelling as a podcast as that sounds, we're going to
Yes.
wrap this thing up. And
It's more profitable than a football podcast.
that's very true based on recent past. But thanks, Barrett Jones. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for taking the time. And it's been fun. And let's do it again sometime. We'd love to come in and ask you some more uncomfortable questions and talk about how your parents are ruining your kids. But
See, like I said, Tommy's paying me $5,000 an hour for this session. I think for the second session, it might have to be more like 10 or 15,000. If Tommy can come up with the funds, then we'll see what happens. By the way, for all the future guests, that's what I got. So if you guys aren't getting that, then you just take up with Tommy. And it's a great show to go on. It's awesome. All expenses paid, vacation to the Bahamas also was thrown in. All kind of stuff.
it's great. This is a taped interview.
Yes, it
we're
is.
thankful for that.
Thankfully, this is not live.
Barrett Jones, thanks so much. Roll Tide.
Roll
All right,
Tide.
guys. Thanks.
Thanks.